I always believed in the work I did at Green Corp. As an environmental scientist, my mission was to protect the planet and ensure our practices were sustainable. That morning, when I left for fieldwork, I had no idea that everything would change. I was documenting biodiversity in a protected area when I noticed something strange. The water in a stream, which had always been crystal clear, was cloudy and had an unpleasant smell. I crouched down to take a closer look and saw dead fish floating on the surface. My heart accelerated. This shouldn't be happening in an area that should be pristine. "Lisa, are you okay?" asked my colleague, Marcos, who was with me that day. "Something is wrong here, Marcos. Look at the water, the fish." "This isn't normal," I replied, trying to remain calm. Marcos approached and frowned. "Do you think it's contamination?" "I don't know for sure, but we need to investigate," he said, taking a water sample for analysis. Back in the lab, I spent hours analyzing the sample. The results confirmed my worst fears: the water was contaminated with industrial chemicals. How could this have happened? I decided I needed to investigate further. The next day, I went to Green Corp's main office. I knew that if anyone had answers, they would be in the company's internal files. Using my badge, I accessed restricted areas and began searching through documents. After a few hours of searching, I found a dossier labeled confidential. My heart raced as I read. Here was evidence that Green Corp was dumping toxic waste in protected areas to save on the costs of proper disposal. "Lisa, what are you doing here?" The voice of my supervisor, Carlos, made me jump with fright. "Ah, Carlos, I was just checking some reports," I lied, trying to sound calm. He looked at me suspiciously. "These are confidential documents. You know you don't have permission to be here." "Sorry, I was just curious," I replied, quickly closing the dossier. Carlos didn't seem convinced, but he let it go. "Next time, follow the protocols," he said, before leaving. My heart was still beating fast. I knew I was treading dangerous ground, but I couldn't ignore what I had discovered. I spent that night awake, thinking about what to do. My loyalty to the company was being tested, but my responsibility to the environment was greater. The next day, I called Marcos for a private conversation. "Marcos, I need to show you something," I said, handing him the dossier I had copied. He read the documents and turned pale. "This is serious, Lisa. If what you found is true, we are talking about a major environmental crime." "I know," I replied, feeling a knot in my stomach. "But what are we going to do? If we report it, we could lose our jobs, or worse." Marcos thought a little before responding. "Have you heard of David Collins? He's a well-respected environmental lawyer. Maybe he can help us." "It's risky, but I don't think we have any other choice," I agreed. "We need to expose this, for the sake of our planet." And so, with Marcos's help, I started planning the next step. I knew I was entering a battle against a corporate giant, but I was determined to protect the environment at any cost. The discovery was just the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. I woke up early that morning, as usual, to continue my investigations into the signs of contamination I had discovered. Equipment in hand, I headed to the protected area, still in disbelief at the possibility that my own company could be behind such a serious environmental disaster. Upon arrival, the toxic smell in the air was unmistakable. The environment, which was once vibrant with wildlife, now seemed a scene of desolation. As I walked along the trail I knew so well, I noticed something that made me stop abruptly. There was a dead deer by the river. His eyes, once alive and alert, were now dull and lifeless. I approached him cautiously, kneeling beside him. "This is worse than I imagined," I muttered to myself, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. I continued my walk, each step heavier than the last. The devastation was not limited to deer. I saw birds lying down, their feathers stained with an oily, sticky substance. Aquatic plants were dead, and fish were floating on the surface of the river, creating a disturbing sight. "This can't go on like this," I thought, determined. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of David Collins, an environmental lawyer whose work I had admired for years. After a few rings, he answered. David Collins speaking. David, this is Lisa Mitchell from Green Corp. We need to talk. It's urgent. Lisa, what happened? I'm in the protected area and... David, the impact of the contamination is devastating. Endangered species are dying. I found internal documents that prove Green Corp is behind this. There was a pause before he spoke again, his voice now deeper. This is serious, Lisa. Are you sure about these documents? Absolutely. I can't ignore this, David. I need your help to expose the truth. Meet me in my office in an hour. I'll bring you anything you need. I hung up the phone, feeling a huge weight on my shoulders, but also a spark of hope. I was doing the right thing, even if it meant taking on my own company. I arrived at David's office a little earlier than agreed. He greeted me with a serious but welcoming look. Lisa, show me what you have. I opened my folder and showed him the documents I had found. He analyzed each one carefully, his face becoming darker with each page. This is incriminating. Green Corp is violating several environmental laws. We need to act fast, he finally said. I know, I replied, trying to control the emotion in my voice. But how do we do this without them finding out? First, we need to gather more evidence. Then we will contact the media and appropriate authorities. But you need to be cautious, Lisa. We can't raise suspicions before we have everything we need. I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, David. I can't allow more lives to be destroyed because of greed. So let's get started, he said, holding out his hand. I squeezed her firmly, feeling a powerful alliance forming. As I left David's office, a new determination came over me. The images of dead animals and environmental devastation were burned into my mind. I knew I couldn't give up, not when there was so much at stake. The fight against Green Corp would be arduous, but the protection of the ecosystem and justice for the crimes committed were causes worth fighting for. When I first met David Collins, I felt a mixture of hope and nervousness. I knew he was the right person to help me expose Green Corp, but I was also aware of the risks involved. I met him in a small cafe in the city center, a discreet place where we could talk without arousing suspicion. David, thank you for meeting me here. I'm desperate. Green Corp is destroying protected areas, and I have proof of it, I began, trying to contain my anxiety. He looked at me intensely, his blue eyes seeming to pierce my soul. Lisa, I've heard of you. Your work at Green Corp is respected. But what you're saying is very serious. Are you sure of your evidence? I nodded and started taking the documents out of my bag. Here are the contamination reports I found and the internal documents that prove Green Corp was involved. I don't know who else to turn to. David looked over the papers in silence for a few minutes, and I could see his expression harden as he read. Finally, he looked at me again. That's more than enough to start an investigation. But we need to be careful. They won't allow the truth to come out without a fight. I know, I replied, my voice shaking a little. I'm willing to do whatever is necessary. I can't just stand by while they destroy the environment. David smiled, a smile that conveyed confidence and determination. Then let's work together. The first thing we need to do is make sure you don't raise suspicions. Continue your work as normal at Green Corp, but start gathering more evidence. We need irrefutable evidence. I spent the next few days following his advice. At work, I acted like nothing was happening, but inside, my mind was racing. At night, I reviewed documents, took notes, and kept David informed of any new discoveries. One day, as we were reviewing some of the evidence I had collected, David suggested that we needed more support. Lisa, I know you're doing a great job, but we need allies. People who can help us spread the word when the time is right. Do you have someone in mind? I asked, curious. Yes, I know an influential environmental NGO that can support us. Plus, I have some contacts that could be useful. But we need to be discreet. One false move and we could lose everything. I agreed, and together we began contacting possible allies. Each new support brought a sense of hope, but also increased risk. We knew that Green Corp would not hesitate to retaliate if they found out what we were doing. During one of our clandestine meetings, David looked at me seriously. "Lisa, you are aware of the danger we are facing, right? They may try to intimidate you, threaten you, even hurt you." "I know, David. But I can't go back. I've seen the damage they caused, and I can't live with that guilt. I need to do what's right." He smiled again, this time with a look of admiration. "You're brave, Lisa. We're going to make it. We're going to expose the truth and make sure these protected areas are saved." As time passed, our clandestine investigation began to take shape. Each new piece of evidence we found was another step towards justice. And although the path was dangerous, the partnership with David gave me the strength I needed to keep fighting. Together, we were determined to take down Green Corp and protect the ecosystem we loved so much. I never imagined that my search for the truth would lead me to uncover such an intricate web of corruption. David and I were sitting in a discreet cafe downtown, our faces hidden beneath caps and sunglasses. I was holding a manila envelope full of documents that we had managed to gather over the last few weeks. "These papers confirm what we feared," David said, looking at the pages with a grave expression. "Green Corp's top executives are up to their necks in it." I felt a chill run down my spine upon hearing his words. "And that's not all," I added, pushing another document towards him. "They have accomplices in local government. Look at these bank transaction records. Payments made to politicians to ensure there was no oversight in contaminated areas." David nodded, his eyes shining with determination. "This complicates everything. We are not just facing a powerful company, but an entire system that is willing to protect itself at any cost." I took a deep breath, trying to process the magnitude of what we were facing. "So what do we do now? How can we expose this without being silenced?" David leaned forward, his voice low and full of urgency. "We need to be meticulous. We can't afford to make mistakes. We're going to need more proof, and we're going to need allies. People who are willing to risk everything to help us." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of responsibility. "I know some people at the university who can help us with scientific analyses. And perhaps we can count on the support of some environmental NGOs." David smiled slightly. "This is a start. But we need to move quickly. Every day that passes, more damage is done to the environment, and more lives are at risk." In the days that followed, our investigation became a race against time. David and I would secretly meet in different places, always keeping an eye out to make sure we weren't being followed. Our goal was to gather enough evidence so that when we finally exposed the truth, it would be unquestionable. One night, as we were reviewing more documents in my small apartment, David looked up abruptly. "Lisa, listen to this," he said, reading an email he had just found. "It appears they are planning to increase contamination in another protected area. We need to warn someone before it's too late." I picked up my phone and called a contact at the environmental NGO I knew I could trust. "Hello, it's Lisa. We need help urgently. Green Corp is about to expand its illegal operations." The voice on the other end of the line sounded worried but determined. "Understood, Lisa. Let's mobilize our resources and try to stop this. And as for you, be safe. We're with you in this fight." I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. "They'll help," I informed David. "But we can't let our guard down. At any moment, someone could find out what we're doing." David nodded. "Let's keep going. There's still a lot of work to do." Each new document we discovered revealed more about the extent of the corruption. It was like peeling back the layers of an onion, each layer bringing more tears and more despair. But also more determination. We were getting closer and closer to the truth, and we knew we couldn't stop now. One afternoon, as we were examining financial records, David looked at me with a grim expression. Lisa, we need to be prepared for the worst. They won't give up easily. And if they find out what we're doing, they won't hesitate to silence us. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. I'm ready, David. I can't let them continue destroying the environment with impunity. Let's go to the end, whatever the cost. And so, we continued our perilous journey, knowing that we were facing a powerful and implacable enemy, but also knowing that we were fighting for a greater cause, for a future where truth prevails and justice is served. Since I started investigating Green Corp's illicit activities, my life has been turned upside down. At work, my colleagues started to notice that something was different. I used to be one of the most dedicated, always the first to arrive and the last to leave, but now I was seen as more distracted, absorbed in my own thoughts. The constant dissimulation was wearing me down, and the tension was palpable. One afternoon, while I was in the lab analyzing contaminated water samples, my colleague, Julia, approached me. Lisa, are you okay? It seems like you're in another world lately, she commented, with a tone of concern in her voice. I'm fine, Julia. Just lots of projects at once, you know, I replied, trying to sound casual. But Julia didn't seem convinced. She frowned and looked straight into my eyes. If you need help with anything, I'm here, okay? You can count on me. I thanked him for the offer, but I knew I couldn't involve anyone else. The more people knew, the greater the risk. However, Julia's suspicion reflected a larger problem. My change in behavior was attracting attention, and that could be dangerous. At home, things were no better. My family started to realize something was wrong. My mother, always perceptive, was the first to comment. Lisa, you've been so distant lately. What's going on? She asked during a family dinner. It's just work, Mom. Nothing to worry about, I lied, trying to sound convincing. But my mother was not so easily fooled. I know you better than that. There's something more. Please don't keep it from us. The concern in his eyes shook me. I wanted to tell her the truth, but I knew it would only make her more worried. So I remained silent, trying to change the subject. In parallel, David was also facing his own challenges. He called me one night, his voice deep and tense. Lisa, I was offered a bribe today, he said bluntly. What? Who did this? I asked, shocked. An intermediary. He said that if I dropped the case, I would receive a substantial amount of money. Of course I refused, but it shows that we are on the right track. They are getting desperate. David, this is dangerous. What if they try something worse? There will be risks, Lisa. But we are doing the right thing. We need to be strong. The determination in David's voice gave me strength, but it also made me realize how much we were risking. The threats didn't stop there. Sometime later, David called me again, this time with even more alarming news. I received an anonymous threat today. They said if we continue, something bad will happen. David, we need more security. We can't underestimate what they're capable of, I said, concern evident in my voice. I'm already taking action. I hired private security and I'm being more cautious. But we need to continue. We can't let fear stop us. Our conversations became more frequent and more tense as the threats intensified. Paranoia began to take over me, looking over my shoulder with every step I took. Every anonymous phone call, every strange car parked near my house, put me on alert. The pressure was taking a toll on my mental health. Sleepless nights and days of constant anxiety were becoming the norm. My family, seeing my condition, tried to intervene. Lisa, you need to rest. This job is destroying you, my father said, worried. Dad, I know what I'm doing. I just need you to trust me, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. But the truth was, I didn't know how much longer I could hold out. We were messing with powerful people, and the feeling of imminent danger was suffocating. Yet each new piece of evidence we gathered, each step we took in the right direction, gave me renewed momentum. These personal conflicts, both at work and at home, were sapping my strength, but they were also strengthening my resolve. I knew that, despite everything, I was on the right path. And, with David by my side, I was willing to face anything to expose the truth and protect what mattered most, the environment and justice. During our investigation, David and I realized we were facing a monumental battle against Green Corp. The corruption we discovered was so deep and pervasive that, at many moments, we felt like David facing Goliath. It was then that we found unexpected allies who gave us new energy to continue. It all started with an encrypted email I received on a particularly tense day. The sender was anonymous, but the content was clear. Someone knew what we were doing and wanted to help. I showed the email to David, who was intrigued. "This could be a trap," he said, frowning. "But it could also be the help we need." We decided to respond cautiously, asking for a meeting in a public place. To our surprise, the person who appeared was a well-known figure in the environmental world, Clara Mendez, the president of EcoWatch, one of the most influential environmental NGOs in the country. "Lisa, David, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person," Clara said, shaking our hands. "We are following your work and believe that your cause is just and urgent. We want to help." I felt immediate relief. EcoWatch had resources, connections and, most importantly, an impeccable reputation. Clara offered us logistical, financial and legal support, in addition to making a team of communication experts available to us to help us plan the dissemination of the information we had. David wasted no time in laying out our immediate needs. We need indisputable evidence and a safe platform to disseminate it. Green Corp has eyes and ears everywhere, and any misstep could cost us dearly. Clara nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "You can count on our cybersecurity team. I'll ask our expert, Marco, to get in touch with you. He is an ethical hacker with an impeccable track record. If there's anyone who can protect you digitally, it's him." That same night, we received a call from Marco. His voice was calm and confident, which gave me a sense of security. "Hello, Lisa and David. Clara told me about your situation. Let's make sure the truth comes out and no one can silence you. I'll need to access Green Corp's systems to find crucial evidence. Do you have any idea where I should start?" David and I shared all the information we had, including a list of servers and files that we suspected contained important evidence. Marco promised to keep us updated on his progress. Over the next few weeks, Marco became an essential part of our team. Not only was he able to access confidential Green Corp documents, he also found a series of emails that showed government authorities' collusion with the company's criminal practices. Each new discovery brought us closer to the truth, but it also increased the risk we were taking. In a meeting with Clara and the EcoWatch team, we discussed the best way to present the information we had gathered. We decided to organize a press conference and simultaneously launch a social media campaign to ensure the message reached as many people as possible. "We need a bulletproof strategy," said Clara. "Green Corp will do everything it can to discredit you. But with the evidence and our support network, we can turn the tide." On the day of the press conference, nervousness was at its peak. Marco was in charge of the live broadcast, ensuring that no cyber attacks could interrupt the dissemination of information. Clara, David, and I were ready to face the press. "We're doing the right thing," David told me, shaking my hand. "No matter what happens, the truth will prevail." When we took the stage, I felt a surge of courage. Clara began the presentation, detailing the findings and showing the indisputable evidence. The reactions were immediate, with journalists bombarding us with questions, eager for more information. At the back of the room, I saw Marco smiling. I knew that, thanks to him and the EcoWatch team, we were protected. The truth was finally exposed, and Green Corp could no longer hide its crimes. Tension was in the air, and I, Lisa Mitchell, increasingly felt the weight of my actions. Green Corp was not about to let our findings come to light without a fight. David Collins, my partner in this crusade, and I began to face a series of obstacles that only increased our determination. One morning, as we walked to the car after another night of analyzing documents and data, I noticed that my car's tires were all flat. I looked at David, who was already on the phone with the police. "This is getting dangerous, Lisa," he said, after hanging up. "We need to be more careful. They know we're getting close." I knew he was right, but the feeling of being hunted was suffocating. The next night, David and I were reviewing our notes when his phone rang again. It was a threatening text message that said, "Stop now or you will suffer the consequences." David looked at me with concern in his eyes. "They're trying to intimidate us, Lisa. We can't let this affect us." "I know that, David," I replied. "But we need to be prepared for whatever comes. We cannot underestimate what these people are capable of doing." Days later, a series of defamatory articles about me began appearing on the internet, claiming that I was involved in unethical practices and that my accusations against Green Corp were unfounded. My phone kept ringing with journalists wanting a statement. "They're trying to discredit you, Lisa," David said as he helped me deal with the barrage of questions. "I know, but this just shows that we are on the right path," I replied, trying to remain calm. The situation got worse when I received an anonymous letter with photos of me and my family, taken without our knowledge. The photos were accompanied by a clear threat: "Give up or you will pay the price." I felt a chill run down my spine. David was next to me, reading the letter. "This is serious, Lisa. We need to find a way to ensure our safety and that of your family." "And how are we going to do that, David?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear and anger. "We can't stop now. We are so close." David put his hand on my shoulder, trying to reassure me. "Let's find a solution. We have allies. Let's talk to the NGO and see what they can do to help us." That night, we met with our environmental NGO allies, who promised to increase security around us and provide us with lawyers to handle any legal action. "We are with you, Lisa and David," said Clara, the director of the NGO. "That will not remain like this. Let's expose Green Corp, whatever the cost." Despite the support, the persecutions continued. Once, when we were about to meet a crucial witness, our car was followed by a black van. David accelerated, trying to lose the vehicle, but it continued behind us. "We have to get to the nearest police station," I shouted, holding tight to the bench. David maneuvered expertly, and we finally managed to lose the van. However, the feeling of danger was more present than ever. Our ethical hacker, who called himself Falcon, also started experiencing problems. He told us they tried to break into his systems several times. "They are desperate," said Falcon, with a dark look. "But I will continue. We have a lot of evidence, and they won't be able to stop us." David and I realized that the evidence we had gathered was becoming a real threat to Green Corp. With each passing day, we felt that we were getting closer to the truth, but also to danger. "We're almost there, Lisa," David said, in an encouraging tone. "We can't give up now." "We're not going to give up, David," I replied, with determination. "We will expose Green Corp no matter what." Those days were pure tension, but also a unity and strength that I had never experienced before. We were ready to face anything to protect the environment and expose the truth. Finally, we reached the crucial point of our investigation. David and I were exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but also more determined than ever. The collaboration with the ethical hacker, who called himself Spectre, was about to bear fruit. We had spent several sleepless nights, analyzing data and cross-referencing information. Our objective was clear: to expose Green Corp once and for all. "Lisa, you need to see this," David said, his eyes fixed on the computer screen. I approached quickly. He was displaying a series of confidential documents that Spectre had managed to hack from Green Corp's servers. They were detailed reports that showed not only the extent of the contamination, but also emails exchanged between executives and government authorities, discussing methods to hide their activities. "It's devastating," I murmured, feeling a mixture of relief and horror. Relief that we finally had the proof we needed, and horror at the magnitude of the damage caused. "We just need to organize all of this in a clear and impactful way." We have to make sure that no one can refute this evidence, said David, already starting to put together a presentation. Let's do this. The world needs to know, I replied, with renewed firmness. With the help of Spectre, we put together a complete dossier. We include images of the environmental impact, graphs showing increased pollution, emails revealing corruption, and even videos from local witnesses. It was an information bomb that would leave no doubt about Green Corp's culpability. We need a press conference. A public, undeniable revelation, David suggested. We're going to call on all the main media outlets. We can't let them stifle this. I agreed, and we started organizing everything. We reached out to journalists, activists, and allies. The environmental NGO that was supporting us was responsible for providing the space and ensuring the presence of influential figures at the event. Everything was moving forward. Lisa, I'm proud of you. It's not easy doing what we're doing, David said as we went over the last details. His gaze was serious, but there was a gleam of respect and admiration. Thank you, David. I couldn't have done this without you. Without all of you, I responded, feeling a rush of gratitude for everyone who was by my side on this journey. The night before the press conference, Spectre called us in for one last review. There's something else you need to see, he said, pointing to the screen. It was a video of a secret meeting between Green Corp executives and senior government officials. They explicitly discussed how to cover up damage and manipulate environmental data. This is the icing on the cake. There's no way they can deny it now, David said, visibly excited. We have to be quick and precise tomorrow. They will try to stop us, Spectre warned. On the morning of the press conference, the atmosphere was tense. David and I were preparing for the decisive moment. Are we ready? I asked, trying to hide my anxiety. We are. Everything will be fine, David replied, shaking my hand firmly. The room was packed. Journalists, environmentalists, and even some ordinary citizens concerned about the future of our planet. When we went on stage, I felt a huge weight on my shoulders, but also an indescribable strength. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We have crucial information to share, I began, my voice steady despite my nervousness. David continued, presenting the documents and videos that prove the corruption and pollution caused by Green Corp. The impact was immediate. Murmurs of shock and outrage spread throughout the room. This is just the beginning. We will not stop until all those responsible are punished, concluded David, with a conviction that resonated with everyone present. The press conference was a success. The evidence was there, irrefutable, and the public reaction was overwhelming. I knew we would still face challenges, but at that moment, I felt like we were finally on the right path to justice and protecting our ecosystem. We did it, Lisa. We did it, David said, hugging me tightly. Yes, we did it. But we still have a lot of work to do, I replied, smiling for the first time in weeks, with renewed hope for a better future. When I was faced with the possibility of exposing Green Corp, I knew the journey would be difficult, but nothing could prepare me for the devastating counterattack we faced. We were just days away from revealing all the evidence we had collected, when everything started to fall apart. It was a morning like any other, or at least it should have been. I was in my small apartment, reviewing the latest details of the press conference we organized. The phone rang, and on the other end I heard David's tense voice. Lisa, we need to meet. Now. His tone left no room for discussion. We meet in a discreet cafe, away from prying eyes. David looked exhausted, his eyes sunken and unshaven. He explained to me that he had received a death threat, something we couldn't ignore. I received an anonymous letter. They know about the press conference and they promise that if we don't give up, they will take drastic action. I don't know exactly what that means, but we can't underestimate Green Corp. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility. David, we can't back down now. We've gone too far. That same night, as I was trying to sleep, I was woken up by an urgent phone call. He was the leader of the NGO that supported us. Lisa, something terrible has happened. David has been kidnapped. My heart stopped for a second. What do you mean? Where was he? He was returning home when he was approached. The kidnappers left a clear message: either you give up on the press conference, or David dies. The words echoed in my mind, leaving me stunned. I knew I had to act quickly. Time was against us. I immediately called the ethical hacker who was working with us. We need to move up the live broadcast, I said, voice shaking. David is in danger, and the only way to save him is to expose Green Corp now. The hacker nodded, his calm voice giving me a little hope. Leave it to me, Lisa. I'll get everything ready. We need a distraction to save time. While he was working behind the scenes, I started looking for David. I contacted the NGO and other people who could help. Finally, we get a clue: David was being held in an abandoned factory outside of town. We quickly organized a rescue team. When we arrived at the factory, the scene was like a horror movie. The walls were covered in graffiti, the floor was covered in debris. We found David tied to a chair, visibly injured but alive. Lisa, I knew you would come. He smiled weakly, despite his wounds. Let's get you out of here, I replied, as the team freed him. We knew we didn't have much time, so we rushed back to town. When we arrived, the hacker had already started the live broadcast. The evidence was being revealed to the world, and there was no longer any way for Green Corp to hide its crimes. The press conference was happening, even without our physical presence. David and I watched the broadcast together, feeling a mixture of relief and satisfaction. The truth was finally out. The reactions were immediate, protests began to form, and the authorities had no choice but to act. Green Corp tried one last move, but it was too late. Public pressure and evidence were overwhelming. Executives were arrested, and corrupt officials began to fall one by one. David turned to me, his eyes shining with excitement. We did it, Lisa. We did it. I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude and pride. Yes, we did it. And now, we can begin to repair the damage they caused. The path to get there had been arduous, full of dangers and sacrifices, but in the end, justice prevailed. And together, we were ready to build a better future. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as the clock ticked down each second. We were just minutes away from the carefully planned press conference. We knew Green Corp wouldn't back down easily, but we had no idea how far they would go to stop us. The ethical hacker, who had now become an essential ally, assured us that everything was ready to go live. The truth was about to be exposed, but I couldn't help but think about David. The phone rang and my heart almost stopped. It was an unknown number. I answered with hesitation. Lisa Mitchell, the voice on the other end, was cold and calculating. If you want to see your friend David Collins alive, you're going to walk away from this press conference now. I felt a lump in my throat. What did you do to him? I asked, trying not to show the panic I felt. He's safe, for now. But that's up to you. Cancel the press conference and everything will go back to normal. Otherwise, you know what will happen. I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I ran to the ethical hacker, who was adjusting the last details of the equipment. We need to stop. They have David, I exclaimed, almost in tears. The hacker, whose name was Alex, looked at me with a serious expression. Lisa, the transmission is ready. We can't turn back now. They're bluffing. If we give up, all our effort will be in vain. But what if they aren't? What if they actually do something to him? I asked, desperate. At that moment, members of the NGO entered the room. One of them, a tall man with piercing eyes, introduced himself as Thomas. We got a lead on David's whereabouts. We have people on the way to rescue him. Trust us, Lisa. We'll get him out of there. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions that consumed me. Okay. Let's continue with the plan. The next few minutes passed in a blur. At Alex's signal, the transmission began. I walked up to the microphone, feeling a wave of determination wash over me. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Mitchell and I am an environmental scientist at Green Corp. Today, we are here to expose the truth about the environmental crimes and corruption that have devastated protected areas and threatened endangered species. As I spoke, incriminating images and documents were displayed on the screen behind me. The room was full of journalists, and I could see the disbelief and shock on their faces. Suddenly my phone vibrated again. It was a message from Thomas. David is safe. Let's bring him here. I felt immediate relief, but I knew it wasn't over yet. I continued the presentation with a steady voice, detailing each piece of evidence we had gathered. In the end, Alex began rebroadcasting the live stream onto social media platforms, ensuring the truth reached as many people as possible. Minutes later, the door opened and David entered, visibly shaken but unharmed. I ran to hug him, feeling tears of relief run down my face. I knew you could do it, he said, with a tired smile. The press conference was an overwhelming success. Green Corp tried in vain to discredit our evidence, but the tide had already turned. Executives were arrested, authorities involved were dismissed, and the company began to be dismantled. A few weeks later, as we walked through one of the protected areas we had helped save, David turned to me and said, "You made a difference, Lisa." We did. I looked at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, and felt a surge of hope. It was teamwork. And this is just the beginning. There is still a lot to do. With Green Corp out of the game, the ecosystem began to show signs of recovery. And although the fight was not completely won, we knew we had taken a huge step in the right direction. Our courage and determination had prevailed, and justice was finally beginning to be served.